This is Micornus, Phokane, the leader and the founder of Church Governance Solutions. I continue with the same topic. We're speaking about ingredients that makes or forms the backbone of a church. Ingredients that form a backbone of a church. And today I want to embark in love as one of those ingredients. The ingredient called love, and that is very important that we speak about that as well. Only those who are humble can show genuine love. We spoke about humility, and I must emphasize that when you are humble enough, you will be able to show love. Love is very, very important. I'm not talking about the worldly love or a worldly kind of love that is so selfish, that is so counterfeit, and it's actually object orientated as well. And sometimes when you talk about the love in the world, you talk about the selfish approach where people love for their own interest. I'm not talking about that. And I want to emphasize that if we are to formulate a very solid church which is having a backbone, we must use this ingredient called love, and that's the love of God. That's why many marriages don't last. Worldly love is only an emotion, remember? And when the emotion is gone, the relationship is gone as well. Because we have actually confused infatuation, which is the love of the world. And we have actually confused that with agape love, which is the love of God. Now, the love of God is the one that is sustainable. It remains even when things are difficult. It remains even when there are challenges. Now, in those churches of ours, I want to emphasize that it is key to have love as an ingredient to form the backbone of your church. And without love in the church, a church cannot be sustainable. A church cannot stand either when people hate each other in the church, when people don't love each other, when they don't relate with each other, it will not be a sustainable church at all. And we must speak about this, that love then becomes the center or a backbone of any church if we are to see a church that is surviving. Now, biblical love, which is now what we call agape love, the love of God, is not like that. It is not simply an emotion, but an act of sacrificial service. So you decide to become conscious about sacrificing for others. It's a service to others. It's a service to God as well. And it's a service to others that is actually out of sacrificial love, whereby you can go all out for somebody else. And this is not just an emotion. It goes beyond emotion. And that's what we're speaking about today. And it's an ingredient that is a backbone of any church. If a church lacks love, you are not going to see any sustenance in that church. And that's why we want to emphasize today as Church Governance Solutions that remember that it is necessary for you to see love and make sure that love is there in your church if you are to see your church sustainable. Many ministry crumble and fall because people just don't love each other in the church or in the ministry that has been started. Sacrificial service is the key word there. It is not only an attitude, it is an action as well. It's not just something that you think of. It's not, but you must act. You must make sure that love is shown by action. Love always does something, and that's tangible, something that you can see, something that everybody can see. Yes, there's a love here because I can see the action behind it. The words he used to describe love in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, when you look at verse 4 to 7, and it's very important. They are all verbs. Love is an act of service that you do, which flows out of the heart of humility. And as we have spoken about humility in the past lesson, you realize that without humility, love cannot be. Because love should flow out of the heart of humility. And when it flows out of the heart of humility, it becomes then sustainable, as I've said. It becomes something that you can hold on and say, love is here and love lives here. Very, very important. And in every church then, we need to see that. Now, biblical love, which is agape love, it means people's needs. It means that you identify people's needs and endeavor to meet them, endeavor to assist them and support them. Because when we talk about love, we talk about the action that follows while you see other people having needs around you. Very, very important. Now, this biblical love, it meets needs. In Luke chapter 10, verse 27 to 28, Jesus affirms the Old Testament command, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Then a lawyer asked him, and who is my neighbor? This is amazing. In verse 29, he says, who is my neighbor? That's a lawyer. Jesus answered with the story about the Good Samaritan, and I'm sure you remember that in Luke chapter 10, verse 30 to 35, that the Samaritan was walking on a road and came unto a man who had been badly beaten, who has been badly marked and injured. And Jesus speaks about this story. He helped him out and he met his needs. And you remember the story because he took him into an inn, he had to pay for him and all that so that it is taken care of. And that's very important. And now when we talk about love, you talk about this because this man, Samaritan, never knew this man. And therefore, he actually went out of his way to assist somebody that he didn't know. And he went out of his way to sacrifice his own money for somebody that he didn't know. If that is not called love, then I don't know what love is. But that's what we need in our churches. Now, it's a backbone of a church where you put this ingredient of love and churches become strong where there are people that love others. Very, very important. And I cannot emphasize enough that without love in any church, that church is as good as dead. Not alive at all. And that's very, very important that we speak about that. Who is your neighbor? Anyone who has a need is your neighbor. You're able to meet, and those needs that you're able to meet, that person is your neighbor. Then who are you to love? Anyone who has a need is somebody that you need to love because you need to extend your hand. That which you have is, you need to extend your hand to them. Whether you know them or not, whether they're a relative or not, it's not an issue of relating to people here. It's an issue of having a need, somebody having a need, and you meeting the need of that particular individual. Meet his need, even if you don't feel an emotional attachment to that person or an attraction for that person. So, because it's not an issue of emotional attachment. It's not an attraction. And as I said, you may not even relate to that person, but please extend your hand. That's the love that we're talking about. A classic illustration of the humility of love is in John chapter 13. Jesus and the disciples were to have a supper together that night. He was betrayed in that night, and the disciples were arguing amongst themselves about who was the greatest. And when you look at it, you'll realize that in Luke chapter 22, verse 24, in those days, people at meals in a reclining position. So they would actually eat in a reclining position, which meant that a person's head should be about 8 inches from someone else's feet. So in other words, you must actually recline. You must look down like this if you are to eat. And that was, meals were taken that way. Now, this is a very important story that's showing us love here. Now, when you do that from someone's feet, it was common courtesy as well for everyone's feet to be washed before people recline for eating. So in other words, before you eat in those days, you have to wash somebody's feet. What a gesture. What a spectacle of humility that we speak about here. It cannot happen without love. And remember that, as I say, when love is actually done in humility, you are saving the person. But the night before Jesus died, there was no servant available to wash the disciples' feet. None of his 12 disciples were willing to assume that because they were preoccupied with their argument over who was to be the greatest. So Jesus took a step off his outer garment and he put it to the ground, his waist, and therefore what he did, he started washing his disciples' feet. What a shock to them. And you realize that that is the love that is shown upon them. Now, the book of John 13, verse 4 to 5. Please read that at your own time. You'll see a classic example of love, classic example of the need of love in our churches. He taught them an unforgettable lesson. When he finished washing their feet, he said, in effect, you are to love one another as I've loved you. So, how did he show his love for them? Not with an emotional attachment. Probably the only action that he showed he had was because of his disciples were full of selfishness, and therefore he wanted to demonstrate that you don't need selfishness if you are to show love amongst one another. That was disgusting because they were selfish amongst each other, and every one of them wanted to become greater than the other. And of course, we know that when Jesus showed that example of washing their feet, he showed love towards them, and that was an extreme demonstration of love towards them. And we have to do that in our churches to be able to meet the needs of the people amongst us, to meet the needs of our own fellow members in churches. Very, very important. Jesus showed them his love by meeting their need. Likewise, we should be able to meet other people's needs. Very, very important. We should meet other people's needs spontaneously, not be by force, and voluntarily, not because we are being forced to do so. Our love should be the reflex, acreon, or of humble heart. It must be something that comes from a humble heart. It must be something that develops from us, not being forced into. We mustn't do it because we've been told to do, but it must be something that's generated from our heart. That kind of heart will always manifest itself. Let me share with you my own example, what I normally do. I normally would identify the needs of others. I would actually not canvass them to anybody. I would actually make sure that it is the need of that person in the sideline that is being met. I would listen to them, particularly of what they need. And therefore, I will make sure that with listening, I go all out. Actually, sometimes even beyond what I have, and make sure that I assist somebody with his needs. And I think this is very important that we do that. And I want to give an example that in our churches, we need to do that because we have the poor amongst us, we're having people that lack, we're having unemployed amongst us, we're having people that go to bed without food. And those are needs. So therefore, if we've got the love of God in our churches, that becomes the backbone of supply of the needs of others. And therefore, the church becomes stronger and the church becomes serving to people, or a service to people as well. I want to end up here today. Your host, Micornus Phokane. Thank you very much for listening to us and being part of this great topic. I hope that you've learned quite a bit out of this. You'll take it up and make sure that you do have love. And in our churches, we express love one to another. And please visit our Facebook page, Micornus Phokane, and our Facebook page, Church Governance Solution. So please like those pages. And also remember also to visit our YouTube channel and Young Men Empowerment Forum, our YouTube channel, and Micornus Phokane as well. So subscribe to those YouTube channels. A lot of materials that were posted there about church governance. And I hope that will help you and your church. Some of you were developing some new ministries, some new churches. Follow us on our page. You will get some tips that will assist you in developing your churches into successful churches. May the good Lord bless you, and allow me to check out right here and say cheers for now.